Thank you, Vanessa. Our first speaker today is Glenn Guilfoyle, Principal of The Next Level, Australia's leading purveyor of sales team optimisation for business to business in corporate Australia. Glenn brings a unique blend of skills, experience and insights to the challenges facing retail pharmacy from many years of experience in sales and marketing management. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Glenn Guilfoyle.
The Qantas debate takes a new turn, with the opposition raising safety concerns.
This is a most irresponsible suggestion, a most reckless and irresponsible suggestion.
Also ahead, misusing Medicare, how patients are rorting the system and pocketing taxpayers' money. Sanctions versus diplomacy, European leaders to hold emergency talks on the crisis in Crimea. And later on the business, the world's biggest drilling services company losing cash and hitting red ink. Live across Australia.
And in breaking news, new research for the first time made available in Australia that addresses the question, can we sustain profitability in retail pharmacy Australia, in spite of the spectre of PBS reform? We're going to go to that breaking story first on this bulletin. Data collected over some 70 retail pharmacy sites across Australia over the past 2 years by on-site observational examination of dispensary workflows and customer engagement has revealed some stunning new statistics and benchmarks. Visit retention rate, 52%. What this means is that on average in Australia, when a customer walks into a retail pharmacy, 52% of the time they will stay for the duration of their dispense. That means 48%, almost half of the time, the customer, by their own volition or by the encouragement of the dispensary team, elects to go and do the shopping, the dry cleaning, whatever, and come back later. The data also shows this, that whether the customer stays or goes and returns, the average time they spend on site is 5 minutes and 11 seconds. Now, what's really interesting about that number is when we start to drill down. And the data shows us that 2 minutes and 28 seconds of that 5 minutes 11, the customer is actually engaged with the dispensary team member. That means less than half of that 5 minutes and 11 seconds is spent in engagement. The average processing time of the script, this is a single script item, is 3 minutes and 52 seconds. So there's more time spent processing a single script item than engaging the customer. And when we start to peel back the layers further and further and drill down into the data, we find that of that 2 minutes and 28 seconds of engagement time, actually 39 seconds on average is spent by the dispensary team member proactively adding health or medicines advisory. 39 seconds. Flipping to the other side of my ledger again, of the 3 minutes and 52 seconds of processing time for a single script item, 1 minute and 33 seconds is what we call white space. Now, white space is that time when the script is not being handled. It's either sitting in a basket, sitting on the bench, sitting waiting for something to happen to it. So considerably more time is spent in white space than in proactive counsel. Drilling further down, again from the customer's experience point of view, when the customer comes into an average Australian retail pharmacy, who do they see? 54% of the time, they will see the pharmacist fronting up at the script counter, which compares to only marginally more than the 51% that the customer sees the pharmacist buried away, feverishly working way through processing the scripts. Now, how do I know all this? I happen to be the lucky guy who heads up a small group called The Next Level, who has been into these 70 pharmacies over the last 2 years and stood there and watched and recorded what goes on from the customer's perspective. Now, let me stay right up front. I'm not a pharmacist. I've never been trained in retail pharmacy. I've never dispensed a script in my life. In fact, at The Next Level, we work in all sorts of different industries, and we do this sort of measuring and benchmarking of workflow effectiveness and efficiency in a range of different settings. In retail pharmacy, we do that against a particular framework of what we measure, how and why. And I'd like to share that framework with you in terms of a proposition for you to think about. And this proposition starts with the notion of one visit, one dispense. It is the notion that the customer doesn't have to go away and fill in time and come back later to collect the script. You think about that 5 minutes and 11 seconds I shared with you earlier. Every time a customer comes into a chosen retail pharmacy, this is a gift. This is a privilege of 5 minutes and 11 seconds of their time. The question that then behoves you as a dispensary team is how you honour that privilege, what you do with it. And so when we score and provide these sorts of reports, we are measuring and recording the degree to which the customer is engaged effectively and the script is processed efficiently. So what do we mean by engagement and effective engagement of the customer? We're talking in terms of maximising proactive counsel, whether that be medicines counsel for the medicine being dispensed right here and right now, or proactive health and well-being counsel on a broader stage in regards to that customer. We're talking about capitalising on responsive counsel. So this is responsive in the sense that the customer is asking for counsel, which differs from proactive counsel where the dispensary team member is offering it or initiating it. Optimising queuing and minimising waiting. Now, you folk know better than me, that is a difficult juggling act to play. But it is the absolute essence of effective customer engagement. What do we mean when we talk about processing the script efficiently? We mean handling it once, minimising the time taken, and eliminating this white space. And in terms of who, the proposition puts it to us that the maximising of proactive counsel should, as often as possible, be done by the pharmacist of the dispensary team member. And when it comes to the traditional separation of the script for processing, the pharmacist should be the one doing it least often as possible. And this proposition culminates with a hypothesis that goes something like this. If there is a compelling argument and case for your customers to stay in the store whilst you're processing the script, and you honour the behaviours in the upper stream and the lower stream, then the hypothesis is you'll be rewarded by increased sales, principally from your health categories, increased customer retention, and decreased operational costs to man and run your dispensary. Now again, I'm not a pharmacist. Who am I to stand before you and put to you a proposition and a hypothesis like this? Well, I'm not. Well, not personally anyway. I'm just the mouthpiece of the data. So let's go back into the data again from this Australian typical average cohort and see what it says to us about this proposition and hypothesis. When we prosecute the data and look for the causal relationships between those stores that have a high ratio on one visit, one dispense and engagement duration, what the data shows us is that there is a moderately strong correlation that reaches statistical significance. What it also shows us is those stores that have a high one visit to one dispense ratio and short processing duration, there is even stronger connection here. The correlation is statistically strong, and that reaches statistical significance. Delving further, engagement duration and duration of proactive counsel. The relationship between those two behaviours is strong and reaches statistical significance. And the relationship between short processing duration and those stores that handle once and have eliminated or at least reduced white space has a very strong correlation that reaches statistical significance. And further, we find from the data that the relationship between high proactive counsel duration and the pharmacist being the team member who is executing that activity has a strong correlation with statistical significance. So again, I think the data speaks, and this is again a fairly representative sample of Australian retail pharmacy. Do the correlations go all the way through to the pointy end, and particularly in regards to increased revenue from the health categories? Well, that's a watch this space. As we tip more and more stores into the pool and start to iron out some of the inconsistencies we've seen with some of the point of sale data coming back to us, we'll expect to see the relatively weak correlations at the moment strengthen up. So that's a work in progress. But let me linger and finish with this thought before I hand over to Nick. If your pharmacy is like one of these average or typical pharmacies in this cohort, then you will be doing something like around about 200,000 customer transactions per annum. The data tells us that for every one of those customer transactions, if you look like a typical store, you will be generating about $15.43 in sales from the health categories, the sorts of categories that Vanessa was talking about, the health and companions categories. When we rank the highest dollar of health sales per customer transaction stores, biggest Goliath all the way to the little rats and mice, we find that the start of the upper quintile, so the top 20 stores, top 20% stores, are doing $22.49. So let's talk in round numbers, and before my pen completely gives way. So there's a $7 difference. Third time lucky. $7 difference to move from average to move to the start or the bottom of the top 20% performers. Again, this is a ratio, dollars per customer transaction. So let's talk in terms of round margins. Let's say that's $3.50 in margin times 200,000 customer transactions. There's 700,000 margin opportunity. And when I listened to some of the presentations yesterday and the figures bandied about in terms of what's going to be lost by PBS reform and price disclosure, the numbers I saw yesterday are swamped by a number like that, completely swamped. But that's easy for me to say and easy for me to write up. And you may well be thinking, that's a 50% increase. But let me go back to my 39 seconds again. 39 seconds is spent currently on proactive health and medicines counsel. So let's say you increase that by 50% as well. So what are we now talking? We're now talking basically a minute, an extra 20 seconds. 20 seconds, that's one question that invites an open answer and an opportunity to foster a health solution sale. So I think I finish where I started. Do you think you can do it? I think you can. And I'm going to hand over to Nick.